Hey everyone, and welcome back to Night English Radio. Whether you're winding down after a long day, taking a quiet evening walk, or just looking for some English listening practice before bed, we're really happy you're here. Tonight's topic is something that seems surprisingly simple, but once you start paying attention to it, you realize it's happening everywhere. Have you ever noticed that native speakers sometimes seem to avoid saying one very small word?
You mean no. It's funny because it's such a short word, but people often go to great lengths not to use it. And if you're learning English, that can be surprisingly confusing. You ask someone a clear question, expecting a clear answer, and instead you hear things like maybe, or we'll see, or I'll let you know. Then you're left wondering, so, was that a yes or a no?
Exactly. I remember talking to a friend who had just moved to Canada and he told me something that made me laugh. He said, "Nobody ever answers my questions." At first, I thought he was exaggerating, but then he gave me examples. He'd invite people somewhere and they'd say, maybe, or I'll see what my weekend looks like, or even, that could be nice. And from his perspective, nobody had actually answered.
That's such a common experience because when you're studying English, you're usually taught vocabulary and grammar. You're taught what sentences mean. But people don't always communicate by saying exactly what they mean. Sometimes they're communicating by choosing what not to say.
That's something I didn't really think about until I started paying closer attention. I used to assume indirect answers meant someone was unsure. Now I realize that's only one possibility. Sometimes they're unsure, sometimes they're being polite, and sometimes they've already made up their mind.
Right. The interesting part is that native speakers usually don't have trouble telling the difference. They're not just listening to the words, they're paying attention to the situation, the tone, the relationship, and even what happens after the conversation. It's almost like everyone's reading the same invisible subtitles.
I like that. Invisible subtitles. Maybe that's why these conversations feel so difficult for English learners. You're translating the words, while everyone else is also reading the social situation.
Exactly. So, tonight, instead of focusing on grammar or vocabulary, we're going to talk about something a little less obvious. Why native speakers often avoid saying no directly, what they're really trying to communicate, and how understanding that can completely change the way you hear everyday English conversations.
Because once you notice the pattern, you start realizing people aren't avoiding honesty. Most of the time, they're trying to protect the relationship.
And I think that's a much more interesting story than simply learning another English expression.
I agree. So, let's get into it. So, here's something I've always wondered. Why does the word no sometimes feel so much stronger than it actually is? I mean, if someone asks me, "Do you want to grab dinner on Friday?" and I simply answer no, I've technically answered the question. It's honest, it's clear, but somehow it also feels like I've accidentally made the room colder.
I know exactly what you mean. What's interesting is that people often hear more than the actual word. A direct no can sound like you're rejecting the invitation, but emotionally, it can also feel like you're rejecting the person. Of course, that's usually not what anyone intends. But conversations aren't just about information, they're about relationships too.
That reminds me of something that happened a few years ago. A coworker invited me to a weekend barbecue. I already had plans, so I smiled and said, "No, I can't." He wasn't upset or anything, but the conversation ended almost immediately. There wasn't really anywhere else for it to go. I walked away thinking, well, that felt shorter than I expected.
I've had moments like that too. The answer itself wasn't rude. It was just final. These days, I'd probably say something like, I'd love to, but I'm visiting my parents that day, or thanks for asking, but I've already got plans. The answer is exactly the same. The feeling is completely different.
That's what surprised me. Those extra few words don't actually change the outcome. I'm still not going. But they somehow leave the other person feeling appreciated instead of dismissed.
Exactly. It's almost like saying, I'm saying no to this situation, not to you. I think that's one of the biggest cultural differences people notice without realizing it. In many English-speaking cultures, people spend a lot of energy separating the relationship from the decision.
That's a really interesting way to put it. So instead of protecting the answer, they're protecting the relationship.
Right. And you see this everywhere. Someone invites you to lunch. A friend asks for a favor. A coworker suggests meeting after work. People often begin with something positive before they decline. Not because they're being fake, but because they want the other person to know, I still value you.
It reminds me of opening and closing a door. If you just say no, the door shuts immediately. But if you say, I'd love to, but I already have plans, it's more like saying, I wish I could. The answer hasn't changed. The atmosphere has.
That's a great comparison. And I think that's why learners sometimes misunderstand indirect English. They assume native speakers are avoiding the truth, but most of the time they're simply softening the impact of the truth. Kindness and honesty aren't seen as opposites. People try to keep both.
So maybe that's the first big takeaway. Native speakers aren't usually avoiding the word no because they're uncomfortable with honesty. They're trying to make sure the relationship feels exactly the same after the conversation as it did before.
I like that. Once you start looking at indirect language as relationship building instead of answer hiding, a lot of everyday conversations suddenly make much more sense.
So if people don't always say no directly, how do native speakers know when someone actually means it? I think that's the part that confuses English learners the most. You hear maybe, and you think, great, there's still a chance. Meanwhile, everyone else in the room has already moved on.
That's because native speakers usually aren't listening to just one sentence. They're looking at the whole picture. The words matter, of course. But so does the person's tone, how quickly they answer, what they say next, and even what they don't say. It's almost like putting together a puzzle instead of translating a sentence.
I remember inviting a friend on a hiking trip once. She smiled and said, "That sounds fun. I'll let you know." At first, I honestly thought she just needed to check her schedule. But then, she never asked where we were going. She never asked who else was coming. She never brought it up again. Looking back, the answer had probably been no from the beginning. I just didn't know how to hear it.
Exactly. Sometimes the clearest message isn't in the words. It's in what happens afterward. Think about the difference between these two conversations. Someone says, maybe. Then they ask, what time are you leaving? How long will you be there? Who's coming? That person is probably still interested. They're gathering information before deciding.
Right. They're still in the conversation. They're curious. The maybe feels alive.
Now imagine the other version. They say maybe, then immediately change the subject. Or they don't mention it again for the next 2 weeks. That maybe usually isn't waiting to become a yes. It's already a gentle no.
I love that phrase, a gentle no, because that's really what it is. Not an unclear answer, just a softer one.
Exactly. And I think that's why context matters so much in English. People often think fluency means knowing more vocabulary, But sometimes fluency is simply noticing patterns. You start recognizing how this person usually speaks.
That reminds me of one of my uncles. Whenever you invite him somewhere, he says, "I'll see," every single time. The funny thing is, if he's actually interested, he'll text you an hour later asking what he should bring. If he's not interested, you never hear another word. Our whole family understands his system. Nobody has ever explained it. We just know.
That's such a perfect example. Every person has little communication habits. Some people soften everything. Some people are incredibly direct. And once you know someone well, you stop focusing on individual words. You start understanding their style.
So maybe English learners are trying too hard to decode individual expressions. They're asking, what does "I'll let you know" mean? When the better question is, what does it mean this time, from this person, in this situation?
Exactly. Language doesn't exist by itself. It always lives inside a relationship. That's why dictionaries can only take you so far. The real meaning often comes from the people, not the words.
But I think there's another important point. Being indirect isn't always the right choice. Sometimes a clear no is actually much kinder.
I completely agree. If someone keeps waiting for your answer or keeps making plans because they think you're still deciding, continuing to say maybe can actually create more disappointment. In those situations, clarity becomes an act of kindness.
Or if someone keeps crossing your boundaries. At some point, protecting the relationship also means being honest. A simple, respectful, "No, I can't," is sometimes exactly what the situation needs.
That's the balance native speakers are usually trying to find. Not, should I be direct or indirect? But rather, how can I be honest while also being considerate? Those two goals aren't competing. They're working together.
I think that's my biggest takeaway from tonight. Indirect language isn't about avoiding uncomfortable conversations. Most of the time, it's about making sure the conversation ends with both people feeling respected.
And once you start hearing English that way, you realize native speakers aren't speaking in riddles. They're simply paying attention to something that's invisible at first, the relationship behind the words.
So tonight, we started with what seemed like a very simple question. Why don't native speakers just say no? At first, it almost feels inefficient. Why not just be direct and get to the point?
But the more we talked about it, the more it became clear that the conversation isn't really about the word no. It's about everything surrounding it. The relationship, the timing, the feelings involved. Sometimes those things matter just as much as the answer itself.
I think that's one of the biggest surprises for people learning English. In textbooks, communication looks very straightforward. Someone asks a question, someone gives an answer. End of conversation. Real life is rarely that neat.
Exactly. Real conversations are full of little signals, a pause, a smile, a change of tone, an answer that's technically incomplete, but somehow feels completely understood. Native speakers grow up noticing those signals without thinking about them. Learners usually notice the words first.
Which is completely natural. When you're learning a language, vocabulary feels like the most important part. But after a while, you realize that communication isn't only built with words, it's also built with intention.
I think that's why learning a language can be so fascinating. You're not only discovering new expressions, you're also discovering how people think about kindness, honesty, and relationships. Sometimes, two cultures value exactly the same things. They just express them differently.
And that's probably the biggest lesson from tonight. A direct answer isn't always the kindest answer, But an indirect answer isn't always the kindest one either. The real skill is knowing which approach fits the moment.
Exactly. Sometimes softening your answer helps someone save face. Sometimes giving a clear answer helps them move forward. Neither one is automatically right or wrong. Good communication is about reading the situation, not following a fixed rule.
So the next time someone tells you, maybe, or I'll let you know, try not to focus only on the words. Pay attention to everything around them. You might understand much more than you expect.
And if you're speaking English yourself, don't worry too much about getting it perfect. Native speakers aren't constantly choosing the perfect phrase either. They're simply trying to communicate with kindness. That's something everyone is still learning.
We hope tonight's conversation gave you a different way to think about English, not just as a language, but as a way people build trust and take care of their relationships.
If it made you notice something you've never thought about before, then we've done our job. And maybe the next time you hear an indirect answer, it won't feel quite so confusing.
Thanks for spending part of your evening with us. Whether you're relaxing at home, getting ready for bed, or listening on your way home, we really appreciate you being here.
Take care of yourself. Keep listening and keep noticing the little things. Sometimes the smallest conversations teach us the most.
We'll see you next time on Night English Radio. Good night, everyone.
Good night.